Hi everyone. Before we begin, if you can all please confirm that you can hear me clearly and see the slides. You can just type in yes in the chat window. Great, we are seeing massive replies. Anyway, please feel free to introduce yourself, your name, position, company, and which country you are based in. It's really good to see an international audience of people from all the industries and backgrounds. Very nice to meet you all. So I welcome you all to today's webinar on the role of EMP, Environmental Management Plan for the Protection of Environment. My name is Sayyida Samia Awais, and I am the lead software engineer at Velocity. For the next 2 hours, it will be our pleasure to host this webinar for you. We would really like to thank you all for joining us today, and we hope that by the end of this webinar, you will have gained good knowledge about the subject matter. So as some of you may know that this is our 59th webinar in a series of technical webinars we are conducting. As a practice, we are conducting one webinar every second Sunday. You can follow us on LinkedIn and make sure to check our website to stay tuned to the latest updates. Also, we are uploading these webinars on our YouTube channel, Velocity, so you can subscribe to our channel and get the latest details of our webinars from there. So today we have an experienced panel of speakers. I am with my colleagues, Mr. Ijazul Karim Rao, Managing Director, Principal Integrity and Safety Consultant, Mr. Anthony James Williams, Junior Manager of Global Sales at Velocity, Mr. Faizan Rahman, Head of Environment HSC Department. So I can assure you that you are all in safe hands today. During this webinar, we encourage you all to keep asking in questions in order to clear any kind of doubts that may arise with time. This will not only help you, but also many others who can usually have the same kind of doubts. You can type in your queries in the Q&A window, or you will either receive the reply in the window or we'll answer it live during the webinar. We'll try to answer as much questions as possible during this session. Also, we will have a detailed QA session after the completion of the topic. Kindly accept our apologies if your question is not addressed. Due to the high volume of questions that we usually receive, we have to be selective in this limited time. Also, we will be issuing a participation certificates to all those who have attended at least 80% of the webinar and have participated in the discussions through Q&A. So since this is quite a technical subject today, and we will be touching the key theoretical and practical aspects of the role of EMP, Environmental Management Plan for the Protection of Environment, in this limited time of 2 hours, we request you all to follow along and keep asking questions to help us in making as engaging as possible. This webinar will include a practical case study. Please note that the client name and the data have been redacted. We will be following a practical approach where we'll walk you through the key aspects through this case study. The agenda for today's session is we'll be giving the Velocity introduction, the introduction about the EMP, the standards and regulations, the case study, and then the environmental management framework. Then potential environmental impacts mitigation, control plan, environmental impacts mitigation and control plan, and Q&A. So before we begin, we should be aware of all the emergency exits which are around us. Although most of us must be in the comfort of our homes, we should be aware of all the emergency exits in case of any emergency. Plus, we have this current COVID-19 situation going on, and we have all the emerging variants every now and then. We should be very careful, take care of ourselves and of those around us, and make sure to maintain a social distance. So now I'll hand it over to Mr. Faizan Rahman, who will be continuing with today's topic.
Thank you so much, Ms. Samia, for giving the introduction and today's agenda. My name is Faizan Rahman, and I'm the head of environment in Velocity. And I will be the one who will present today's webinar. And I hope that I will answer all your questions, and the presentation will be very good asset for you to learn about what is EMP and how it can facilitate for the protection of the environment. So before going into the deep of the EMP, Environmental Management Plan, we will have a look at what is EMP, an introduction of the EMP. So basically, EMP is a documented procedure which basically define or which basically give us the environmental mitigation measures and the management measure that must be incorporated in the project activities in any stage of the project. In the stage of the project mean the project can be in a design, the project can be in a construction. We will discuss in the later slides that what kind of EMPs are applicable depends on the type of the project or the stage of the project. So basically, this is the documented procedure that will help us to define the environmental mitigation measures and the management measures that are need to incorporate in the project activities at the different stage of the life cycle. Yes, this is the types of the EMP. Normally, the broader term, we normally use the EMP, Environmental Management Plan, but based on the project stage, there are the different kinds of the EMPs or the terminologies that are being used depending upon the project stage. So the first one, that is a CEMP. CEMP stands for the Construction Environmental Management Plan. This plan is covers only the impacts and the mitigation measures that are related to the construction. And there is another plan, environmental management plan, that is the OEMP, that basically relates to the operation of the project. And then there is another one that is a DEMP, and it is basically correspond to the decommissioning or demolition of the project activity. So the CMP is a site-specific plan that developed to ensure that the appropriate environmental management practices are followed during the construction phase of the project, which I explained to you that the CMP is basically related to the construction activity of the project. And then the OEMP is a site-specific or the industry-specific plan developed to ensure that the environmental management practices to eliminate and control environmental impacts are followed during the commissioning and operation phase of the project. So this is the thing that I explained, that the CMP is related to the construction phase of the project and OEMP is related to the commissioning and the operation phase of the project. Whereas the DMP, that is a time period that correspond to any event, process or activity that occurs during the decommissioning phase. So the decommissioning or the demolition activity, if we have to manage the environmental, if we have to manage the environment through the EMP, then we have to develop the DEMP, that is the decommissioning or the demolition environmental management plan that will correspond to the decommissioning phase of the project. So these are the requirements. EMP is required for 3 project life cycle. The phase 1, that is the EPC phase. EPC phase is basically a construction phase, engineering, procurement, and construction. Commissioning, that is the phase 1. Then phase 2, that is the operation phase, and phase 3, decommissioning or disposal stage. Here I will explain you that it is not mandatory in any project. All decommissioning is required. In most of the project, decommissioning is not the part, because if the project is going to be constructed, so maybe there is no demolition components for the project. So normally CMP, which is related to the construction, that is required, or before the start of the project, the OEMP is required that will relate to the operation stage of the project. And definitely the third one, that is the decommissioning or disposal, but it is not required in all project, because in all projects the decommissioning is not the part of the project. Then the scope of the EMP. In this EMP, normally we have to cover the management and the mitigation measures, and what are the institutional arrangements that are required. Institutional arrangements are organizational arrangements. What are the resources that you need to implement the EMP? So all are coming under the institutional arrangement. Then the implementation and the supervision responsibilities, that who is responsible for what. The higher management involvement is required, because they are the one who provide the resources, and they are the one who will provide or approve the resources as well. So they are the main accountable for all implementation of the EMP, because they are the one who has to provide the all the resources. So in this EMP, we have to basically identify the responsibility of each person in the organization. And then the monitoring and evaluation requirement, then how we have to evaluate that our EMP is very effective. If we have to, maybe we have to do some audits, that either it can be on a quarterly basis, it can be on a biannual basis, it can be on an annual basis, that what is the evaluation and how the EMP is effective while protecting the environment. So we have to see the monitoring and evaluation requirement as well. Then the implementation schedule, that this EMP is required for how many time, maybe 6 months, maybe 1 month, maybe 1 year. So implementation schedule is also required. Then the training needs and the budget. To implement the EMP, definitely we need the resources and to train them so that they can properly implement the EMP. The training needs is mandatory. We have to train the staff so that they can implement the EMP properly as per their true soul. And then includes measure to consider during project implementation and operation, provide action to be taken to implement these measures. So these are all the actions we have to give them in the EMP so that all these actions can be implemented along with the mitigation measures. So these are the goals. Basically, we have to develop the procedure so that the project's mitigation measure can be implemented. And the aims of EMP are basically it's a auditable commitments to practical and achievable strategies and design and standard. Basically, the EMP is we have to give such a commitments or such a procedure that can be auditable after, as I mentioned before, that after quarterly, after biannual basis, annual basis, we have to do some audit at what are the evaluation or what how effective EMP it is. So we have to basically give a very auditable commitments, and then develop an integrated plan for comprehensive monitoring and control of the project impacts. And then we have to develop a plan. I will explain in the later stage or in the slides that what are the integrated plans that is required for the comprehensive monitoring and control of the project impact. There are, first we have to identify the impacts related to that particular project, and then accordingly we have to develop some plans to control those impacts. For example, if we have identified the air quality impact, then we have to give a plan which is a air quality control plan, so that all the mitigation measures we can incorporate in the plan and that can be implemented during the project stage. So in this one EMP, we have to develop a plan for comprehensive monitoring and the control of project impacts, and then ensure the community that the environmental management of the project is acceptable. The purpose of the EMP, basically the purpose of the EMP is to protect the environment. We have to minimize the negative impacts or the significant impacts, and then we have to enhance or increase the positive impacts, and then ensure environmental sustainable planning, construction and operation. We have to develop a project, or we have to execute the project in a sustainable manner. We have to take care of the environment. We have to develop all the projects, but in a manner so that the environment could not be affected. Then reduce problems and delays during the project implementation, improve overall project quality, and add value to the project. Definitely, if a project is having a EMP, then definitely their value will be increased, because then the international donors, your project operator or your client, your project proponent, definitely it will increase the value, because if you are having a EMP, it's mean that you are protecting the environment, you are caring about the environment. So definitely it will increase or it will add the value to the project. What does EMP cover? As I explained in the previous slides, this is basically the methods and the procedures to achieve the environmental objective and targets. In some project cases, in some scenarios, before the start or before the commencement of the project, environmental impact assessment is required by the regulatory authorities. So even after the approval of the authorities, approval of the EIA, the authorities may ask for development of the EMP. So whatever the targets and objective we have set in the EIA, so basically this EMP is providing a procedure to implement or to achieve those objective and targets that we have mentioned in the EIAs. And then what are the environmental performance indicators to measure progress towards achieving the targets and objective? this is basically can be identified based on the audit. As I explained in my previous slide, that the commitments, auditable commitments we have to give in the EMP. So basically it identifies the environmental performance indicated to measure progress towards achieving targets and objective. EMP is based on the compiled information and data during the environmental screening. EIA summarizes targets, objective and regulations, and nominates the individual responsible and give target dates. So the elements of the EMP. First of all, we have to describe the mitigation measure and how they will be implemented. As I mentioned before that, basically, first of all, we have to identify the impacts, and then according to impacts, we have to give the mitigation measures in the form of the plans. As I given an example that if we will identify the air quality impacts, then we have to develop the air quality control plan, which will include all the mitigation measures and how they will be implemented as well. So all these detail will be in the EMP. And then the description of the residual impacts as well. Residual impacts are those which are after the implementation of the mitigation measures. For example, before the mitigation measure, if the impact is significant or maybe high medium, and after the mitigation measures, maybe the impact is low or medium. So after the implementation of the mitigation measures, the impacts are the residual impacts. So we have to see that description of the residual environmental concern and how they will be managed. And then the program for the monitoring environmental concern and indicators, identification of who will be responsible. As I mentioned in my previous slide, that we have to give the organizational structure for the implementation of the EMP, that who will be responsible for what. As I mentioned, that the main part is the top management, because they are the one who give the resources, they are the one who approve the resources, so they are the accountable for mainly the implementation of the EMP. So in this EMP we have to give a structure of the organization for the development of the EMP. And then the developing a monitoring plan, including items to be monitored. For example, if we are identified different impacts, for example, again I will give an example of air quality, then we have to give some mitigation measures, and then how it should be monitored, and when it should be monitored, the frequency and who should be monitored, all these will be in the monitoring plan. Sorry. And then we have to give the cost as well, that how much is the cost is related to that particular EMP for the implementation as well. Identify the sources of the funds as well as the potential training needs as well. Yeah, before I go, I will go into the next slide. We can have questions. We can answer some questions so that everybody can have on board on this one.
Okay. First question. Does CEMP also covers the IEE or EIA for any in-progress project?
No, as I mentioned in my slide, that the first of all we have to develop the EIA. For example, there are the different stages of the project. For example, the feed stage. The feed stage is basically an initial design stage. So in that stage, the environmental impact assessment is required. And when the project goes into the detail stage, detail engineering or the EPC phase, then we have to develop basically update of the EIA, and then for the construction side or for the construction phase, we have to develop the CEMP. And before start of the operation, we have to develop the OEMP. And if that project also include the demolition, then we have to cover a DEMP as well. Otherwise, the construction will only deal with the CEMP, and the OEMP will only deal with the operation phase.
Next question. Do EMP have sub-plans?
Yes, as I told you that the each basically the EMP, either it's CMP, either it's OEMP, or either it's a DMP. This main management plan also further having different plans. For example, if we are identified the quality impact, air quality impact, then we have to develop the air quality control plan. If we have noise impact, either insignificant or significant, we have to develop a noise control plan. So all those environmental components we have to cover with the control plans. I will, in the later slide, I will show you some structures of the EMP, like the CMP or OEMP, then it will clear more.
Next question. Please explain enhancing the positive impacts. To what extent is that controllable?
Yes, basically, as I told you that it gives the add value to the project. So if we are implementing the EMP, for example, if we have identified there is a socio-economic impact, and if we have developed some control plan that there should be a grievance mechanism, there should be a complaint address system, then definitely it will enhance the positive impact of the project. And definitely, if we are controlling the impact or controlling the impact or reducing the impact, ultimately it will increase the positive impact. Yeah.
Next question. If a project has already EIA or IEE as per the regulator, so do we need EMP further for the same project?
It depends on the authority. It depends on the authority. Sometimes the authority may ask for the further management plan. Sometimes not. It depends on the region. It depends on the authority. If I talk about the Abu Dhabi, here in UAE, basically in regulating some of the cases, if we are submitting the EIA, environmental impact assessment, then authority may ask for the CMP as well for the construction. So it depends on the authorities.
Okay. What is the difference of EMP implementation against the ISO 14001 requirements?
Basically, both are the same. The structure or the theme is same. Basically, the protection of the environment. In the ISO 14001, we have to give the resources. We have to manage the environment impact, and then we have to give the resources, and then we have to give the training. We have to give the cost estimation, everything. And in the same way, it's in the CMP or in the EMP, it is the same. The theme is the same.
Next question. This EMP is a part of a quality plan or a part of HSE plan?
No, it's a separate. It's not either the quality plan or either it's not a HSE plan. It depends on the region and it depends on the authority. Normally, if I talk about for the construction project, normally the contractor has to develop the HSE plan. But to get the NOC from the regulatory authority, the EIA or these kind of a management plans are required to get NOC from the regulatory authority. But HSE plan and the quality plans are different.
Next question. What type of effective approach is to be taken for EIA?
What kind of, sorry, come again?
What type of effective approach is to be taken for EIA?
See, again, I will mention that it depends on the type of the project and the regulatory authority. Specific guidelines are required or developed by the regulatory authority. So we need to follow those technical guidelines for the development of the EIA. And definitely for the implementation of the EIA, what are the environmental management framework we will develop as a part of the EIA or as a separate document in the form of the environmental management plan. The effectiveness of the implementation, it depends on how we are implementing and how we are carrying out the audit and evaluation and the monitoring of the implementation of the EMP.
Okay, next question. Is there any standard pattern to follow in EMP?
Yes, it depends on the region, but in the later slides, I will show you some structures of the CMP and OEMP. But again, it varies from region to region or from authority to authority.
Next question. Residual concern. Please clarify again.
Which one? Sorry.
Residual concerns.
Procedural.
Concerns.
Yeah, procedural mean again we have to develop the procedure in the EMP that what are the impacts are related to that project and how we have to manage those impacts. So all these are the procedure that we have to develop in the form of EMP.
Next question. What is the main difference between EMP and EMR?
EMR is basically a part of the EMP, but major part is, or the major component, that is the EMP. Okay, so now we'll start again for the next slides for the EMP, and if we will take again another session for the questions so that we can answer your questions. So the importance of the EMP. It's basically an instrument for implementing environmental management commitments, condition, and requirements of the project, and it also enhance or promotes the self-regulation, anti-regression, and we have to address all the relevant management issues and can be drafted in a consultative manner, also incorporates regulatory requirements and facilitate environmentally sustainable development and decision making process. It basically able to form the basis for consultation. It also give the flexibility, comprehensive, updatable, and a tool for promoting accountability. Accountability means that who is responsible for what. We have, as I mentioned before, that in the EMP we have to give the structural organization structure of the EMP. So we have to make the accountable as well, that who is accountable for what. Okay, so as I mentioned before that I will present to you some structure of the CMP or the EMP. This is the report structure or the plan structure basically for the environmental management plan, and you can see that we have to give some introduction, project description, and then the environmental management, and then what are the impacts are related to that particular project. And then there is another session, that is environmental mitigation measures, and in this one you can see that there is a air quality control plan, there is a soil and the groundwater contamination control plan, there is a water quality and the marine ecology control plan. So all these are the plans which include the mitigation measures. And then there is another last session, that is a monitoring and auditing. In this monitoring and auditing, that we have to define that who is responsible for what and how we have to monitor the effectiveness of the mitigation measure and how we have to do the audit. Either it can be on a quarterly basis, either it can be on a biannual basis, or either it can only be a annual basis, or either it can be an internal or it can be an external as well. So these are all come under the monitoring and auditing section. This is the same report structure. It is CMP structure and OEMP is the same. The only difference is that we have to cover only the impacts that are related to the operation, not the construction. In operation environmental management plan, we have to cover only the operational environmental management environmental impacts, and in CMP we have to cover only the construction environmental impacts. This is again the report structure for the DMP. It is also the same as OEMP and the CMP. The difference is here only that we have to cover those environmental impacts that are related to only demolition of the project. So this is the standard and regulation. Standards and regulations, these are vary from region to region and regulatory. It depends on the regulatory as well. So here in UAE, basically UAE federal law 2000. Law number 24 of 1999, there is a law number 5, waste management, federal law 1999. There is some international convention as well, and some other regulatory guidelines, including the international and local as well. Now we will present you a case study. Basically, we were having a project which is a well drilling and the testing, which is onshore block, and we have developed operation and construction environmental management plan for that particular project. In this project, basically company want to intend to drill the 2 appraisal wells over the existing discovery in the region, and there are the 3 exploratory well as well. So each well having different 200 into 200 shell constructed at the proposed well location, and there is a camp as well, and there is a rig shall be moved once the rig move road and come site and well site construction is completed. So these are the components of the project. First of all, they have to construct or develop the site, and then they have to develop the camp, and then they have to develop the road so that the rig can be mobilized. So these are all the components of the project. So this is the activity with respect to the construction, site preparation, civil and earthwork, excavation, backfilling, sand in embankment, stabilization and reinstatement of the protection berm. These are the construction activities. And then there is a well drilling activities like positioning, rig up, drill, surface hole, surface casing, cementing. So these are all related activities to the well drilling. And then the well testing activity, the drill stream testing of the well will be conducted. All the testing equipments like Christmas tree, plug, etc. will be of international standard. All these are activities related to the well testing. So this is the project location in Abu Dhabi, where there were the exploratory and the appraisal wells. This is the basically the rig layout that were used by the company. So this is the environmental management framework that we will discuss in this one. So the environmental management program aims to basically assess and control the major areas of interaction between the project activity and the potential physical, biological, chemical, and the socio-economic receptors within the project. So basically, environmental management frame it provides to assess and control the interaction. What are the components of the project that are going to interact with the environment? There can be a physical components, there can be a biological components, or there can be a chemical or socioeconomic components. So all we have to assess and control them as well to ensure proper decision making with respect to the project planning and implementation. And it also provides the early identification of the mitigation measure to further minimize the risk to the environment. And in this section, we will discuss about the policy statement, environmental management system, roles and responsibilities, regulation and requirement, awareness training and sessions, how we have to review the document, how we have to update the document, environmental commitments and coordination with external entities, and addressing the complaints. In the policy statement, the key element of the HSE policy are, first of all, we have to identify the leadership and their commitment. And then we have to identify some objective and how we have to achieve those objectives. We have to make the strategies as well. And then the organization, resources and components. As I mentioned in my previous slide, that we have to make the organization structure for the implementation of the EMP. So in the policy statement, we have to give the structure of the organization and what are the resources that are required and what are their competency. Either they are capable to implement the objective and the targets, to achieve the objective and targets, and to implement the EMP. So we have to see the competency of the resources as well. And then the risk evaluation and management. Risk evaluation, that either the impact is significant, either the impact is low, either the impact is medium, or high, and then how we have to manage those risks or the impacts. Then the planning standards and the procedure, and then implementation and the monitoring. In the previous slide, I told you that in the structure that we have to see that how we are monitoring the implementation of the EMP, and then how we are evaluate the implementation of the EMP. Auditing, the monitoring, all these are the tool for the monitoring and the implementation of the EMP. And then the review. The review normally it's on an annual basis, but sometime if there is a major change in the process, if there is major change in the project activity, then we have to review the CMP or the EMP again, and we have to update as well. Environmental management system, basically there is the company for which we have developed this EMP. They were certified ISO 14000 certified, energy management certified, and there are some project specific standards and plan as well. So in this plan, we have identified the authorities or the responsibility of the key authorities or the personnel. For example, what is the role for the regulatory authority? So the regulatory authority in this case is the one who has approved the this environmental management plan. They are the one who reviewed the management plan, and they are the one who approve as well and give the environmental NOC or the permit for that particular project. And they are the one who basically is responsible for external auditing, approving of the external auditing of the implementation of the EMP. And then the project proponent, they are the one basically who is carrying out the project, and they are the one who set the objective and implementation of the development and implementation of the EMP. Then the project manager, the construction manager, HSE manager, environmental engineer, HSE officer, HSE engineer, then the subcontractor, the drilling contractor, and then all the employees. So these are the main organization structure of that particular project, and each designation have their own responsibilities with respect to the project and with respect to the implementation of the EMP. So the legal requirements, in this one, there is a national environmental laws and regulation, local regulatory authority, then there is a ADNOC standard, international convention and protocols, and then the local guidelines as well. So in this one, we have developed the training matrix. As I mentioned before, that the competency of the person that are responsible for the implementation of the EMP, that is a critical part. So we have to make sure the competency of the person as well. So in this plan, we have developed a matrix, the training matrix that must be implemented during the project. So you can see that we have developed the training matrix for the project proponent. We have developed the training matrix for the project manager, project engineer, HSE manager, environmental engineer, procurement team, supervisor, and all other person that are involved in that particular project. So you can see that based on the designation and their requirement or their involvement in the project, we have developed a training matrix so that they can be a source for the implementation of the EMP. Then document review and update. As I told you that we have to update or we have to review the EMP, either it's on a quarterly basis, either on an annual basis, that how effective is the management plan is. In the previous slide, I have told you that there are the certain conditions. There are the certain conditions that require the EMP to be updated. For example, if the changes in the work scope which necessitate significant modification in the site activity, manpower, equipment, location plans. So if there is any change with respect to the site activity, with respect to the equipment location, then we have to update the management plan. For example, before the project was away from the marine environment, but maybe after the change in the location, it can come to the near to the marine environment. So definitely the impact will be different. So we have, in that scenario, we have to develop or we have to update the management plan. And then there is the extension of the current scope that may lead to the additional activities. If in the same location, if there is any additional activity which were not covered previously, then we have to update the EMP. Then changes in the local, national, or international regulatory requirements. In this scenario, we also have to update the EMP, and the review of the current environmental plans by client or the third-party review, which may lead to the corresponding request for an update of the OCMP. Yes, there is another possibility or the condition that requires the update of the EMP if the client or the third-party review mean the audit, the third-party audit, which will basically determine the effectiveness of the EMP. And if on the basis of the client's requirement or on the basis of the third party review, if it feels that this EMP is not effective, therefore we have to update the EMP. So in that scenario, we have to update the environmental management plan. Yeah, is there any question? You can take it.
Okay, there's one question. What elements can be added to an offshore EMP than an onshore EMP?
See, in the CMP or in the EMP with respect to the offshore and onshore, you can see that in the onshore, the impact related to the marine cannot be the significant if it is totally onshore. But in the offshore, definitely there will be an impact on the marine ecology, and there is an impact on the marine water. So in offshore EMP, we have to identify the impacts related to the marine, or accordingly we have to propose the mitigation measures to control those impacts. But in onshore, those impacts are not relevant as compared to the offshore.
Next question. Which of the certification systems, EMAS or ISO 14001, is the most challenging for a company?
Sorry, come again.
Which is of the following certification systems, EMAS or ISO 14001, is the most challenging for a company?
See, it depends on the impacts and the organization. Either it can be sometime it can be challenging for ISO 14001 and in mass as well. So it depends on the company and the structure.
Next question. Please explain potential impact and mitigation plan.
See, in the management plan, first of all, we have to identify the impacts. Either the potential impacts can be significant, or either it can be insignificant. So first of all, we have to identify the impacts. What are the impacts that are associated with that particular project or the project activity, and then accordingly we have to propose some mitigation measures to control those impacts. So first of all, we have to identify the impacts. Either it can be a significant or insignificant, and accordingly we have to propose some mitigation measures.
Next question. How to distinguish between EIA and CEMP? Because EIA itself is the detailed document. Please mention few points.
Yes, in the beginning, I explained that it depends on the region and it depends on the authorities. In some regions or in some authorities, even after the approval or the development of the EIA, the authorities may ask for the development of the EMP. Either it can be during the construction, before the construction, or before the operation. Yes, EIA is a complete document that also details about the management framework. But again, for further enhancement of the document and to further reduce the negative impact, authority may ask for the development of the environmental management plan.
Next question. EMPs required only for significant ones or for all EIAs?
No, it does not relate to the EIAs basically, and it does not only require for the significant. EMP, see, EMP, there are the two scenarios. Either it can be required by the regulatory authorities. So in that one, if the project is having a significant impact, then the authorities can ask for the development of the environmental management plan even after the approval of the EIA. In the second scenario, maybe it is not required by any regulatory authority, but the project proponent or the company may develop the EMP to add a value to that particular project. So in that cases, all the either the significant or insignificant both have to be covered in the EMP.
Next question. So it seems EMP is subsidiary to ISO 14001 requirements. How EMP be specific with respect to construction and decommissioning or disposable stages?
Basically, while explaining the structure of these management plan, I mentioned that in the CMP we have to cover only those impacts that are associated with the construction, and in the OEMP we have to cover only those impacts that are related to the operation, and in the same way in the TMP we have to cover only those impacts that are related to the demolition or the disposal. For example, if there is a high-rise building and we have to demolish that particular building, so we have to develop the DMP, that how those demolition waste will be managed, how the air, because in the demolition there will be a high dust, so how that particular dust will be, or particulate matter will be managed. So all those impacts that are related to the demolition will be identified in the DMP, and accordingly mitigation measures will be proposed. In the same way, if we will discuss about the construction of the road, definitely there will be a heavy equipments that will be on site, so that will be the source of the air quality, and there will be a dust generation as well, and there will be some other components, heavy vehicular movements will be there, so that will also generate the air quality impact. So accordingly we have to propose the mitigation measures. In the same way, if I talk about the operation phase or the OEMP, if I talk about the industry, so in industry, during the operation, there may be a stacks or there may be a chimneys that will be operate during the operation. So what are the impacts that are associated with those operation of the chimneys or the stacks? So we have to identify those impacts and we have to propose some mitigation measure so that we can control those impacts.
Next question. Based on which ISO international standard EMP is based on?
See, it's the main theme is basically, or the main soul is ISO 14001, but again, it depends on the local authorities as well, or the region to region. In Abu Dhabi, in UAE, there is a guideline, there is authority, there is a guideline that requires that must be followed during the each stage of the project. So, but it varies from region to region and authority to authority.
Next question. How we can implement OEMP after commissioning of project annually or any other practice throughout the life of operation of project? They will submit the auditing and monitoring report.
See, before the operation of the project, OEMP is required. Either now there are the two scenarios. Either the OEMP is required by the regulatory authority before the start of the operation, or either it's maybe the requirement of the client or the project proponent to develop the OEMP before the start of the project. In that perspective, if we develop the OEMP, then it will cover only the operation phase or only the operation activity of that particular project, and it should be audit either. It depends on us how we define the frequency for the audit in the EMP. Either it can be a quarterly basis, either it can be a biannual basis, or either it can be a annual basis. But minimum annual basis, it should be audit that how effective the EMP it is, and the condition that I mentioned in the previous slide, that on those 4 conditions, then OEMP will also need to be updated.
Next. Which method do you use for the impact assessment?
Impact assessment, again, for the EIA, it again different matrices that are available, international acceptable matrix that can be used, either 4x4, 6x6. These are the different matrix that are available. Any of them can be used, or if your local authority has defined some matrix that can be used for the impact assessment.
Next question. Is there a guideline on the frequency of conducting environmental audit during the project life cycle?
See, again, it depends. It depends on the local authority. If I talk about our region, UAE or Abu Dhabi, there is a minimum, that is a quarterly audit that is required by the local authority, that on the basis of the quarterly basis, the audit should be carried out for the development project, for the construction. But for the operation, it depends on the authority again. While issuing the NOC, they define the frequency of the audit. Either it should be quarterly, biannual, or annual. Okay, so this is all the question we will take. We will have another session as well for the question. Now we'll start for other slides. So the environmental commitments, basically in this plan, we have defined that how the contractor or the project proponent are committed for the protection of the environment. In particular, the company and the contractor aspire to achieve the following objective. They have developed some objective for the protection of the environment, that they will comply with all the local and international national requirements. They will contribute delivering the project environment and sustainability policy objective, and they will allocate all the resources to implement the this environmental management plan, and they will also introduce the improvement for the existing work practices, so that the impact can be further minimized. They will also comply with the conditions stipulated in the permits. So after approving of this EMP, whatever the condition that will be identified by the local authority, they will comply with all those conditions, and they will also develop the monitoring and the reporting mechanism so that they can see how effective this EMP, and either they need to update or either they have to review the EMP. So all these monitoring and the reporting mechanism they will develop as an objective. So they have we have developed the system for the coordination with the external entities or the complaints. External communication, the following will be considered as a form of the external communication: the telephonic or the documentary communication, external complaint closure notification, and the notification clarification to be provided. And then there was a complaint system that was developed as a part of the EMP that identify the nature of the complaint. Either it can be from the local community or either nearby industries. Then we have to request an immediate investigation by the environmental team that what are the reason for that particular complaint. Then we have to verify the condition and the mitigation measures. Then corrective action, we have to take the immediate corrective action that the complaint we receive. The complaint will be closed out while supporting the documentation. So these are the potential impacts that identified: the air emissions, surface water, soil and the groundwater impacts, terrestrial ecology, marine ecology, noise and vibration, traffic impacts, waste management impact, and socioeconomic impact. So in this particular project, we have identified the impacts related to the air, we have identified the impacts related to the surface water, we have identified the impacts related to the soil and the groundwater, we have identified the impacts related to the terrestrial ecology, we have identified the impacts related to the marine, noise, vibration, traffic, waste management, and the socioeconomic. So the air emission, the potential source for dust, gases, and VOC emission is from the construction, well drilling, and well testing. You can see that the site clearance, that will be a source of the air emission because that will generate the dust. Concrete work, that is also a source of the dust or the gaseous emission. Excavation work, diesel generator also source of the gaseous emission. Stockpiling, vehicular movement, and the well drilling, testing, and flaring, because flaring is the one of the major source for the air emission in this project. Then the surface water impact, accidental deliberate discharge of untreated waste. The waste that is, however, see, there was a one question that what is the difference between the offshore EMP and the onshore EMP. So this is the reason this project was onshore. That's why there is no as such the surface impact that we have identified in this project. But definitely for offshore, there will be some surface water or the marine water impacts. Then we have identified the impacts related to the soil and the groundwater. If we improper storage or handling of the fuel and the chemicals, accidental spillage of the chemical, that are the source of the impact for the soil and the groundwater. If we do not properly manage the waste, improper storage of the waste material, and then the loss of the topsoil due to the site clearance, improper disposal of the storm water, sewage, industrial wastewater. These are all the impacts or all the sources for the soil and the groundwater impacts. This is the terrestrial ecology impact that we have identified. Removal of the vegetation, artificial lighting, noise generation, vehicular movement, accidental spillage. These are all the sources of the terrestrial ecology impact. Then marine, again, this project was significantly away from the distance from the marine environment. So therefore, there was no interaction between the project and the marine environment. Therefore, there is no impact identified in the marine ecology. Noise and vibration, definitely there were heavy movement, heavy equipment movement, or the vehicular movement, that are basically the source of the noise and the vibration. So the noise generated during the assessed road, upgradation of the civil work, rotating parts of the machinery, vehicular movement, heavy machinery, or drawworks. Then the traffic impacts. uh, Basically, because of that, this project, there were the enhanced traffic movement or the vehicular movement that increased the traffic load on the road. So that is the impact that we have identified. The vehicular movement involved in the project operation could in the normal public vehicular transport system as well. Then waste management impact. So the waste that are expected during this project, that is a construction or the demolition or the excavation waste, sanitary waste, wash water from equipment or machinery, drilling mud, water-based mud, water used for the cleaning, drilling waste, generation of the waste process water, and hazardous waste from the process. Then the socioeconomic issues, there were some positive issues or there were some negative issues. The negative impacts are change in the local social culture or the norms of the local community and the traffic congestion. However, the positive impacts that are this project gives the employment opportunities or the increase the local economy. So these are all. Now we are going to explain the control or the mitigation measures. See, again, I will explain here. In the previous slides, we were discussing about the sources or the impacts of this project on the different components of the environment, which include the air emission, which includes the terrestrial ecology, the waste, and other components. Now we are going to explain basically the mitigation measures or the control plans with respect to those particular impacts. The vehicle, these are the impact mitigation measures. That vehicle will be maintained regularly, the speed limit, water sprinkling to avoid the dust generation, unnecessary slide clearance, burning of the waste, environmental site inspection checklist, stack emission monitoring. So these are all the mitigation measures that we proposed, and these are the mitigation measures that we propose for to control the soil and the groundwater impact. Appropriate spill containment kits, the proper and specified area for mixing of any chemical, waste pit with liner, provision of the dedicated hazardous waste storage, bins, sanitary waste, water should be collected in STP, sewage treatment plant. The fuel and the chemical should be stored in the impervious storage area. In the same way, we have developed a control plan for terrestrial ecology, minimization of the vegetation clearance, implement vehicle speed limit policy, off driving should be discouraged, hunting of the fauna species should be avoided, minimize noise and the light pollution. In the same way, we have developed the control plan for the noise and the vibration, that the sound suppression devices must be installed. Use of the noise bounds between high noise generator and the sensitive receptors. A direct band such that they will carry noise away from the sensitive receptors, and implement vehicle speed limit policy. Then the traffic control, speed restriction, security checking in and out, etiquette, parking and sign postage, and appropriately designated junctions. Then with respect to the waste management, we have developed that there should be a procedure for the waste reduction, waste reuse, waste minimization, and appropriate waste storage. Definitely, we have to follow the hierarchy of the waste management. The waste reduction, reuse, minimization, appropriate waste storage, appropriate waste disposal, on-site treatment, and use of sustainable material. So if in this project, chemical or hazardous material management plan we have developed, the hierarchy, the elimination, substitution, isolation, and engineering control. Elimination means removal of the hazardous substance that is not essential. Substitution, use of less hazardous substances, or isolation, that the as separation of the process from employees by distance or by the barriers. And then the engineering control, using machinery, equipment, or process that minimize the workplace contamination. Then we have developed the contingency plan. We have developed based on the Tier 1, Tier B, or Tier C. Tier 1, that is on a minor accident. The Tier B is the medium, or Tier C is the major accident or the emergency. So we have developed a contingency plan in case of any a kind of a emergency, either tier A, tier B, or tier C. Then we have developed the emergency management plan. This plan details the response to the emergencies that may occur during the project. It can be the scope covers emergency response organization, list of the emergency coordinators, emergency procedures, emergency evacuation. So in this one, we have developed, as in the previous slide mentioned, we have provided the contact detail of the person who are responsible for the rescue, so that the people or the employees can contact them in case of any emergency. Then we have developed the social management plan or the control plan. Cross culture session should be conducted among workers to protect social norm of the project area. Unnecessary interaction of site workers with local community should be avoided. Protection of cultural heritage should be avoided, should be done, or HSC training should be conducted on a regular basis. Then we have developed reporting and auditing requirement. Reporting, as I mentioned, that the reporting is an effective tool to keep project management team informed about the effectiveness of the steps taken to protect the environment. And then the construction and the operation activities will entail several reporting requirement as per the prevailing rules and regulation. Then incident reporting and the periodic and the quarterly performance reporting. This performance, either it can be a quarterly basis or either it can be on a biannual or annual basis. Reporting requirement, environmental incident that will be investigated as soon as possible. Periodic or quarterly environmental performance report should contain all the recommendations. HSE team should organize and manage internal HSE audit inspection on a daily, weekly basis, and there should be an external audit as well, minimum as a twice in a year. So these are the internal audit. You can see that auditing in accordance with the refueling procedure, it should be on a weekly basis, and who is responsible to carry out this audit, that is also mentioned. All spill trainings, drill spill, this should be on a weekly basis. H2S drill, it should be a bi-monthly. Fire drill, it should be a bi-monthly. So these are all the HSE programs and their frequency and the responsible party we have developed in this plan. And then the external audit that the company head office shall undertake no less than 2 formal audits per year. It means that the biannual audit was proposed in this management plan. And then the environmental inspection and audit will be documented in the following manner: that the contractor daily progress report, weekly environmental inspection record, internal audit program, external audit program, internal audit reports, external environmental audit reports, register of NC, and then the contractor closeout environmental inspection report. So these are the inspection or audit documents that we have developed for this management plan. So this is all about for today. So we can have a session for the question answer.
There's a question. Have you experienced that a project has been stopped because of violation of the local regulations?
See, local authority have a fully authority to stop the project if they are not complying with the local requirements. Either, for example, in some scenarios, the EMP is required to get the NOC. If a project proponent or the contractor does not take the NOC without developing the EMP, or if they start the project, definitely it's considered as a violation, or there can be a hefty fine or stoppage of the work as well. So it depends on the local authority.
Next question. How does EMP incorporates waste management plan and energy management plan?
See, in the as I mentioned, that we have to identify the sources and the significance of the impact in the EMP. That either what are the sources, and either they are the significant or insignificant, and on those basis we have to propose the control plan, which will include the mitigation measures. For example, there should be a waste segregation area. There should be collection through the third party. There should be a separate bins for the waste area for the different kind of the waste. So all this mitigation measure, it depends on the project activity.
Next question. Do we need EMP on quarterly, biannually basis for a project, or we need just one EMP for the whole project, especially in Pakistan?
See, in EMP is only required for the one time, and as mentioned that we have to see the effectiveness of the EMP basis on the quarterly or biannual audit or the performance monitoring report. Either the developed EMP is enough to control the impacts that are associated with that project. We have to see through the monitoring of the EMP, either by the internal audit or by the external audit.
Okay, next question. Does the OEMP say anything about sustainability issues of a project if when used will be harmful to the environmental in the long run?
See, definitely, the management plan, purpose of development plan is basically to reduce the impact and the sustainable growth. So definitely, the purpose for the development of the EMP is the sustainable development or the sustainable protection of the environment. So definitely, all these are covered in the EMP.
Next question. How do we do impact assessment of oil spillage in large water bodies? And based on it, how do we devise remediation measures?
See, again, it depends on the tire level. Normally, all spill response plan particularly is required to develop. A standalone all spill response plan is required to develop for some kind of a scenarios, and it depends on the tire A, B, C. Internationally, there are the different categorization normally used. Sometimes tire A, B, C is used, sometimes tire 1, 2, 3 is used. So it depends. So standalone separate document is required in the form of all spill response plan. That will also detail about what other resources are required, what are the procedures, how it has to manage. All this should be covered as a separate standalone document.
Next question. Is climate change impacts may be accommodated broadly in EMP capacity? Definitely, the climate change is the consequence of not properly pursuing of EIA in project stages, as well as in domestic living standard of life. How to tackle the environmental mitigation of routine pollution from domestic life?
See, again, it depends on the national level. How the national level, the climate change or the impact associated with the domestic pollution deals. For example, if a national level, if there is a policy to use the public transport rather than the individual or the personal car, definitely it reduces the domestic pollution. So it depends on the national policy framework.
Next question. Can we include aircraft noise as a part of EIA?
Aircraft noise, again, it depends on the project. Normally for the development or the operation phase, aircraft noise is not significant for that particular project.
Next question. How is EMP's documentation utilized during audits or during any contingency planning for the future improvements?
See, in the CMP or in any kind of the EMP, there is a minimum documentation requirement is mentioned, at what minimum documents you need to maintain during the execution of the project, that must be followed, and that must be audited while evaluating the performance of the EMP.
Next question. How to control undeclared chemicals or material in EMP?
Undeclared mean whatever the chemicals that are supposed to use in the project, that must be mentioned in the EMP or in your inventory list, and accordingly the impacts and the mitigation measure must be proposed. There must not be any undeclared chemicals, or if you talk about that chemicals that are not declared, either it's a hazardous or non-hazardous, then it depends on their SDS. Either we have to store or we have to manage the chemicals based on the SDS. Either it can be considered as a chemical or hazardous material. It can be come under those particular part.
Next question. As environmental issue, any plan or impact assessment if groundwater is high in that area, and what are the methods to mitigate?
See, again, if the groundwater is high at that level, there is a particular study that need to be followed, because since the CMP is not only the one basically that relate to that particular impact. because then the hydrodynamic modeling or some other studies that need to be carried out to see the reason of the high water and what could be the impact on the groundwater because of that particular project. So that must be carried out by the other studies.
Next question. Is there OEMP or EMP checklist?
See, there is no OEMP or EMP checklist particularly, but there are the particular guidelines that need to be followed by the local authority. It depends. In UAE, in Abu Dhabi, there is a particular guidelines that must be followed for the development of such kind of the EMPs.
If any operational changing, such as process plant technology that's stated in EIA is being changed, does OEMP or EIA need to be updated? Is needed?
Yes, yes, it is the same condition that I mentioned in my slide, that if that is a scenario, if there is any operational change and it seems that it changes the significance of the impact, then the EIA or either the if EMP is developed for that project, then EMP must be updated or reviewed.
Next. How long should you shelve the project documentation if it was already audited, commissioned, and considered completed?
Sorry, come again.
How long should you have shelved the project documentation if it was already audited, commissioned, and considered completed?
See, there is no as such a requirement with respect to the EMP, but for other, it can be depend on other standards. For example, maybe if that company or the project is ISO certified for other, so maybe there is a timeline for keeping those documents with the company. So it depends on that ISO standard or the company policy.
Next question. What does zero emissions mean? Is it ideal or real, especially in hybrid vehicle technology?
See, zero emission, if you talk about the zero emission, it's not as such the ideal, but again, now the technologies are coming, the sustainable technologies are coming, who is helping us for the zero emission, or if I talk about the liquid, for the liquid discharges.
Okay. What is the relation between SGD with EMP?
SGD. Basically, see, EMP is a separate document that can be developed either in continuation of the EIA or as a standalone document. So there is nothing relation between any other documents. So I hope we have answered all the questions that has been asked, and I hope this session is a very fruitful session and you have learned a lot for this session. Give your feedback in this session, and this session is also will also be available on our YouTube channel. After some days, you can subscribe our channel, and then you will get the notification when this webinar will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. And you will also get the participants who have attended this session, they will also receive the certificate by email with our company sign and signature, everything for your participation and your basically to just encourage you. And as mentioned in the beginning, that we are conducting a webinar even after every 2 weeks. Okay, so you can just keep update with our platforms. You can keep updated with our LinkedIn page and other social media, so that you can aware that which webinar is coming in upcoming days. So thank you so much, all of you, and thank you. Bye bye.